The overhead lights in the pediatric wing flickered once, then died completely, plunging the hospital corridor into darkness. Sarah Mitchell's heart lurched as she heard it, a small, terrified voice cutting through the sudden blackness like a knife. "Please, someone, don't leave me alone in the dark." She'd been delivering patient charts to the 3rd floor when the power failed, her double shift at Boston General already stretching into its 14th hour. The voice belonged to a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, and the raw panic in it made her abandon the charts on the nearest nurse's station and feel her way toward the sound. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm here," Sarah called softly, her hands brushing along the wall as emergency backup lights began their slow, stuttering warm-up. "You're not alone, I promise." Her fingers found a doorframe, and she slipped inside the room. The dim red glow of the emergency system finally kicked in, revealing a small boy sitting bolt upright in his hospital bed, his hands gripping the sheets so tightly his knuckles had gone white. But it was his eyes that made Sarah's breath catch pale blue and unfocused, searching frantically in her direction but not quite finding her. He was blind. "I'm Sarah," she said gently, approaching slowly so as not to startle him. "I'm a nurse here. Can I sit with you until the lights come back on?" The boy's breathing was rapid and shallow, on the edge of hyperventilating. "My dad's not here. He had to go to a meeting. He said he'd be back before dark, but he's not here, and I can't see anything, and nobody came when I called. I'm here now," Sarah interrupted gently, reaching the side of his bed. "And I'm not going anywhere. May I hold your hand?" A small, trembling hand immediately shot out, finding hers and gripping it with desperate strength. Up close, she could see tear tracks on his cheeks, and a purple bruise discoloring his left temple recent, maybe a day or 2 old. "What's your name?" she asked, settling into the chair beside his bed, her thumb rubbing soothing circles on the back of his hand. "Marco," he whispered. "Marco Castellano. I'm 7 3/4. "It's very nice to meet you, Marco. That's a strong name. My dad says it means warrior," Marco said, his breathing starting to slow slightly. "But I don't feel like a warrior. Warriors aren't scared of the dark." Sarah's heart twisted. "Everyone's scared of something, Marco. Even warriors. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are." Marco was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Are you scared right now?" "A little," Sarah admitted honestly. "Power outages in hospitals always make me nervous. But I'm less scared now that I have you to keep me company." A tiny portent. Smile flickered across Marco's face, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "You're nice. Not like the other nurses." "What do you mean?" "They're nice, but they're busy. They check my charts and give me medicine, but they don't really talk to me. Not like a real person." His voice dropped even lower. "And they get uncomfortable when I ask them to describe things, like they don't know how to talk to someone who can't see." The observation was heartbreakingly perceptive for someone so young. "Well, I promise to describe anything you want," Sarah said. "And I'm a very good describer." "Really?" For the first time, genuine interest replaced some of the fear in Marco's voice. "What do you look like?" "I like to imagine faces." Sarah smiled, even though he couldn't see it. Something in his earnest request had unlocked a protective instinct in her chest. "Let's see. I'm 28 years old. I have brown hair that's probably a mess right now because I've been working since 6 this morning. It's long, down to about the middle of my back, and it's wavy, not curly, not straight, somewhere in between. My eyes are hazel, which means they're brown with little flecks of green in them. I'm about 5 feet 6 inches tall, and I'm wearing blue scrubs covered in little cartoon stethoscopes." Marco giggled, the sound like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Cartoon stethoscopes? That's silly." "Very silly," Sarah agreed, delighted by his laughter. "But they make kids smile, so I wear them anyway." The main lights suddenly blazed back to life, fluorescent brightness flooding the room. Marco flinched, his grip on Sarah's hand tightening again. "It's okay," she soothed. "Just the power coming back on. The dark's gone now." But Marco didn't release her hand. "For me, it's always dark," he said quietly, his earlier moment of levity evaporating. "The lights don't help me." Before Sarah could respond, the door to Marco's room burst open, and a man strode in with the kind of presence that made the space feel suddenly smaller. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble, all sharp angles and intensity. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent, and everything about him screamed wealth and power and barely controlled fury. But when his eyes, the same pale blue as Marco's, landed on his son, the fury melted into something else entirely. Relief. Fear. Love so fierce it was almost painful to witness. "Marco," the man breathed, crossing to the bed in 3 long strides. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The meeting ran long, and then the traffic. "Papa." Marco released Sarah's hand to reach toward his father, who immediately gathered the small boy against his chest, one large hand cradling the back of Marco's head. "I promised I'd be here before dark," the man said, his voice rough with emotion. "I broke my promise. But you're here now," Marco said, his words muffled against his father's expensive suit jacket. "And Sarah stayed with me. She wasn't scared of the dark at all." The man's gaze shifted to Sarah for the first time, really seeing her. His eyes were the coldest, most calculating she'd ever encountered, until they landed on her and something in them shifted, softened, almost imperceptibly. "You stayed with my son during the outage," he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah stood, suddenly aware of how rumpled and exhausted she must look compared to this man's polished perfection. Of course, he was frightened. No child should be alone when they're scared. "Most people wouldn't have bothered," the man said, still holding Marco close. "Most people would have had somewhere more important to be." There was something in his tone, a bitterness, perhaps that spoke of experience with people who had places to be, things more important than a frightened, blind child. "Then most people are wrong," Sarah said simply. The man studied her, with an intensity that made her want to shift uncomfortably, but she held his gaze. She'd learned long ago not to back down from intimidation, and despite the gentleness he showed his son, this man was definitely intimidating. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah Mitchell. I'm a nurse here, though Marco isn't technically my patient. I was just passing by when the power went out." "Just passing by," the man repeated, something like amusement flickering in those cold eyes. "And you stopped to comfort a stranger's child in the dark. Like I said, no child should be alone when they're scared." Marco squirmed in his father's arms. "Papa, can Sarah stay? She promised to describe things for me. She's really good at it." The man's expression softened again as he looked at his son. "I'm sure Sarah has other patients to attend to, Piccolo." "Actually," Sarah heard herself say, surprising even herself, "my shift just ended. I don't have anywhere I need to be." It was a lie she had. Exactly $3 in her checking account, a mountain of student loans, and a studio apartment with a rent increase notice she'd been avoiding for a week. She should be leaving to start her evening shift at the diner across town, but something about Marco's hopeful expression made the words spill out anyway. The man's eyebrows rose slightly. "You would stay? With a child you don't know, whose father is a stranger to you?" Sarah shrugged. "Marco's not a stranger anymore. We're friends now." "Right, Marco?" "Right," Marco agreed enthusiastically, reaching out his hand toward where he thought Sarah was, about 2 feet to the left of her actual position. She moved to take his hand, and his smile brightened. "See, Papa? Friends." For a long moment the man said nothing, just watched Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Then he extended his free hand toward her. "Dante Castellano," he said, "and I'm in your debt, Miss Mitchell." His handshake was firm and warm, and Sarah tried to ignore the way her pulse jumped at the contact. Dante Castellano. The name tickled something in the back of her mind. She'd heard it before, though she couldn't place where. "Just Sarah," she corrected, releasing his hand. "And you're not in my debt. I did what anyone would do." "No," Dante said quietly, his gaze never leaving hers. "You did what almost no one would do, and that makes all the difference." If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The 3 of them settled into an unexpected rhythm over the next hour. Dante sat in the chair on one side of Marco's bed, while Sarah perched on the edge of the mattress on the other side, describing everything she could think of: the pattern of the linoleum floor, the way the evening sun slanted through the window, turning everything golden. the ridiculous cartoon bear on the IV pole that Marco's last nurse had stuck there. Marco drank it all in, his questions endless and enthusiastic. What color was golden exactly? How big? Was the bear? Did the floor tiles make a pattern or were they random? And through it all, Dante watched. Not Marco, his son, held his attention frequently, of course, but he kept returning his gaze to Sarah, studying her, assessing her with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "Sarah," Marco said suddenly, interrupting her description of the cityscape visible through his window. "Why are you here? I mean, if you're not my nurse and your shift is over?" It was a fair question, and one Sarah didn't have a good answer for. I guess I just wanted to make sure you were okay after the scare with the lights. But you don't even know me." "Not yet," Sarah agreed. "But I'd like to, if that's okay with you and your father." She glanced at Dante as she said this, and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. There was something raw in his gaze, a hunger that went beyond the physical, though she couldn't deny the awareness that had been building between them since he'd entered the room. "Marco," Dante said, his voice carefully neutral, "would you mind if I spoke with Sarah in the hallway for a moment? Are you going to tell her to leave?" Marco's voice held a note of panic. "Papa, please don't make her leave. She's the first person who's talked to me like a real person since we got here. Not like I'm going to break." "Piccolo, breathe," Dante interrupted gently. "I'm not making her leave. I just need to discuss something with her. We'll be right outside the door where you can hear our voices. I promise." Marco relaxed slightly, though his hand found the edge of Sarah's scrubs and held on. "You'll come back?" "I promise," Sarah said, gently extracting her clothes from his grip. "I'm just going to talk to your dad, and then I'll come right back and tell you about the murals they have in the children's wing. They're really beautiful." Satisfied with this, Marco released her and lay back against his pillows, though his face remained turned toward the door toward their voices. In the hallway, Dante positioned himself where he could still see his son through the small window in the door. He stood close enough to Sarah that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that made her far more aware of him than she wanted to be. "I need to know why you're really here," Dante said without preamble, his voice low enough that Marco wouldn't overhear. "People don't just give up their free time for strangers' children. What do you want?" The question stung, though Sarah tried not to let it show. "I don't want anything except to make sure Marco's okay. I know that's apparently hard for you to believe, but it's the truth. In my experience, everyone wants something," Dante said, his eyes hard. "Money, connections, favors." "So what is it, Sarah Mitchell? What's your angle?" Sarah felt her temper flare, the same temper that had gotten her in trouble more than once in her 28 years. "My angle is that I'm a human being with basic compassion. Your son was terrified and alone in the dark, and I helped him. That's it. No hidden agenda, no ulterior motive. Just basic human decency, which apparently is so rare in your world that you can't even recognize it when you see it." She turned to go back into Marco's room, done with this conversation, but Dante's hand caught her wrist gently, not restraining, but enough to stop her. "Wait," he said, and the hardness had left his voice. "You're right. I'm sorry. That was unfair." Sarah turned back to find something like shame in his expression. "In my world," Dante continued quietly, "kindness usually comes with a price tag. I've learned to be suspicious of people who offer help without being asked. But you genuinely just wanted to help my son." "Yes," Sarah said simply. "That's all it was. That's all it is." Dante was quiet for a moment, his hand still loosely circling her wrist. His thumb brushed over her pulse point, and Sarah knew he could feel the way her heart was racing. "Marco has been through hell these past 6 months," Dante said finally, his voice rough with emotion he was clearly trying to contain. "The accident that took his sight, the months of surgeries and recoveries, the adjustment to a world he can't see. And through all of it, do you know what terrifies him most?" Sarah shook her head. "The dark," Dante said. "Not his darkness, he's learned to cope with that. But when the lights go out, when he knows that everyone around him is as blind as he is, it terrifies him. It levels the playing field in a way that makes him feel even more vulnerable. Because then everyone is navigating his world," Sarah said softly, understanding dawning. "And he knows how hard it is." "Exactly." Dante finally released her wrist, but his gaze held hers. "You stayed with him. You talked to him like a person, not a victim or a tragedy. You promised to describe things, and you did it without making him feel like a burden. Do you have any idea how rare that is? It shouldn't be rare, Sarah said. It should be normal. Should be. Yes. But it isn't. Dante ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect style. I can give Marco everything money can buy, the best doctors, the best schools, the best care. But I can't give him what you gave him in an hour. Normalcy. Connection with someone who sees him, not his disability. You see him, Sarah said. Anyone watching you with him can see how much you love him. Of course I love him. He's my son. But love isn't always enough. Dante's expression was bleak. His mother couldn't handle his blindness. She left 3 months after the accident, said she couldn't bear to look at him anymore, knowing he couldn't look back. The casual cruelty of that statement made Sarah's stomach turn. That's horrible. Yes. Dante's voice was flat, emotionless in the way of someone who had already processed too much pain to react to it anymore. And Marco heard her say it. He may not be able to see, but his hearing is perfect. Sarah's heart broke for the small boy in the room behind them, who carried that knowledge alongside all his other burdens. He's lucky to have you. I'm not sure Marco would agree, Dante said with a bitter smile. I work too much. I'm not home enough. I keep breaking promises because my business demands my attention. Like tonight, I promised to be back before dark because I knew the weather might cause power issues, and I broke that promise. The one thing my son needs most, and I couldn't give it to him. There was such raw self-recrimination in his voice that Sarah found herself reaching out, her hand settling on his forearm without conscious thought. You're here now. You came as soon as you could. That's what matters. Dante looked down at her hand on his arm, then back up at her face. You're very kind, Sarah Mitchell. Kinder than I deserve. Everyone deserves kindness, Sarah said, especially people trying their best in impossible situations. Something shifted in Dante's expression, a crack in the controlled facade he wore so carefully. I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about your answer before you give it. Okay, Sarah said warily. Would you consider spending time with Marco? Not as his nurse. I'd hire you privately. I'd pay you well, far more than you're making at the hospital. He needs someone like you in his life. Someone who can give him what I can't. Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the offer. I don't understand. You want to hire me to be what, exactly? A companion, a friend, someone who can help him navigate his world and teach him that blindness doesn't mean he has to be alone or afraid. Dante's intensity was almost overwhelming. Name your price, Sarah. Whatever you're making now, I'll triple it, quadruple it, more, if that's what it takes. Sarah didn't. I know what to say. The offer was tempting, God knew she needed the money, but something about it felt wrong, like she'd be profiting off Marco's vulnerability. I can't take money for being someone's friend. You wouldn't be just a friend. You'd be providing a service, companionship, support, help with his mobility training and daily skills. You have nursing experience, which means you understand his medical needs. You're perfect for this. But I don't have any training in working with blind children, Sarah protested. You have something better. You have instinct and compassion. The rest can be learned. Dante stepped closer, his voice dropping. Please, Sarah. I'm asking you as a father who would do anything to help his son. Marco connects with you in a way he hasn't connected with anyone since the accident. I can't let that slip away. Sarah felt the weight of his plea pressing against her chest. Through the window in the door, she could see Marco sitting up in bed, his head tilted as he listened for their voices, his small hands fidgeting with the edge of his blanket. I need to think about it, she said finally. This is a big decision, and Of course, Dante interrupted, pulling a business card from his jacket pocket. Take all the time you need, but please, at least come back tomorrow. Spend a few hours with Marco before you decide. See if you think you could make this work. Sarah took the card, her fingers brushing his again. The card was heavy stock, embossed with his name and a phone number. Nothing else. No company name, no address. What exactly is it that you do, Mr. Castellano? She asked, studying the minimalist card. Something shuddered in Dante's expression. I'm an import-export, family business. Nothing you need to concern yourself with. The evasiveness set off alarm bells in Sarah's mind, The same instinct that had kept her safe through years of working night shifts in rough neighborhoods and navigating Boston's less desirable areas. But before she could press further, Marco's voice called from inside the room. "Are you done talking? Sarah, you promised to tell me about the murals." Dante's expression softened immediately. "We should go back in. I don't want him to worry." They returned to find Marco exactly as they'd left him, except his face was turned toward the door with an expression of such relief when he heard their footsteps that Sarah felt her resolve weakening. "I'm back, just like I promised," she said, settling onto the edge of his bed again. "Ready to hear about the murals?" "Yes." Marco's enthusiasm was infectious. "Tell me everything." For the next hour, Sarah described the massive murals that adorned the walls of the children's wing. A whimsical underwater scene with dolphins and sea turtles, a space mural with planets and shooting stars, a forest scene with hidden animals peeking from behind trees. Marco hung on every word, asking questions and laughing at her more. Theatrical descriptions. Dante remained mostly silent, watching them with an intensity that Sarah tried to ignore, but she was acutely aware of his presence. The way his eyes tracked every gesture she made, every smile she drew from his son. When a nurse came in to check Marco's vitals and administer his evening medication, Sarah glanced at her phone and realized with a jolt that it was nearly 8 o'clock. She'd missed her shift at the diner entirely. "I should go," she said reluctantly, watching Marco's face fall. "But I'll come back tomorrow, okay? If you want me to." "Promise?" Marco asked, reaching for her hand. Sarah squeezed his fingers gently. "I promise. And I'll bring something special to show you well, to describe to you." "What is it?" "If I told you, it wouldn't be a surprise," Sarah said with a smile. "You'll just have to wait until tomorrow." Dante stood as Sarah prepared to leave, following her to the door once more. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for staying, for being patient with him, for giving him something to look forward to." "He's easy to spend time with," Sarah said, honestly. "He's smart and funny and brave." "He gets that from his mother," Dante said, then seemed to catch himself. "The smart and funny parts anyway. The brave part is all his own." Sarah wanted to ask more about Marco's mother, about the accident that had taken his sight, about the shadows she saw lurking behind Dante's careful control. But it wasn't her place. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Good night, Mr. Castellano," she said instead. "Dante," he corrected. "Please, after what you've done for my son, I think we're past formalities." "Dante, then. Good night." She was halfway down the corridor when his voice stopped her. "Sarah?" She turned to find him standing in the doorway of Marco's room, backlit by the fluorescent lights, looking both powerful and somehow vulnerable. "Whatever you decide about my offer," he said, "thank you for tonight. You gave my son something I couldn't piece. That's worth more than any amount of money I could offer you." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice, and continued down the hallway. But as she pushed through the stairwell door, the elevator would take too long, and she needed air. She couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple job offer. The studio apartment Sarah called home was exactly as depressing as she'd left it that morning: peeling paint, a mattress on the floor that served as her bed, a kitchenette that consisted of a hot plate, and a mini-fridge she'd bought secondhand. The bathroom door didn't close all the way, and the radiator clanked and groaned but never quite managed to heat the space adequately. She dropped her bag by the door and sank onto the mattress, pulling out Dante Castellano's business card. In the harsh light of her single-floor lamp, she could see the quality of the paper, the subtle texture of the embossing. This was a man who had money, serious money, if his suit and his son's private hospital room were any indication. Sarah pulled out her phone and typed Dante Castellano Boston into the search engine. The results made her blood run cold. The first hit was from the Boston Globe, dated 8 months ago. Castellano family under investigation. Links to organized crime, alleged. The second was from a business journal. Dante Castellano expands Castellano Enterprises despite federal scrutiny. The third was from a gossip site. Boston's most dangerous bachelor. Inside the world of Dante Castellano. Sarah clicked on the first article, her stomach sinking with each paragraph. The Castellano family had been a fixture in Boston for 3 generations. Their legitimate businesses, shipping, real estate, restaurants allegedly serving as fronts for money laundering, smuggling, and various other criminal enterprises. Nothing had ever been proven. Charges never stuck. Witnesses disappeared or recanted their testimony, and Dante Castellano, the current head of the family, was considered the most dangerous of them all. Ruthless in business, connected to powerful people in both the criminal underworld and legitimate society, and absolutely untouchable by law enforcement despite their best efforts. Sarah's hands shook as she set down her phone. She'd spent the evening with a mob boss. She'd sat in a hospital room with his son, held the child's hand, promised to come back tomorrow. She'd almost accepted a job working for a man who was allegedly involved in organized crime. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Dante. I hope you made it home safely. Marco wanted me to tell you he's already excited for tomorrow. Whatever you decide about my offer, please at least come see him. He needs you more than you know." Sarah stared at the message, torn between fear and something else, something that felt uncomfortably like obligation. Marco was just a child, blind and frightened, abandoned by his mother and clearly desperate for connection. None of what his father might or might not be involved in was Marco's fault, but getting involved with the Castellano family, even peripherally, could be dangerous. Sarah had worked too hard to build a life modest as it was to risk it all for a stranger, no matter how much that stranger's son had touched her heart. She typed out a response 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, she settled on, "I'll come by tomorrow afternoon, but we need to talk, Mr. Castellano, about everything." His response came within seconds. "I'll tell you anything you want to know." "Thank you, Sarah. You have no idea what this means." Sarah set her phone aside and lay back on her mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow she would go to the hospital, talk to Dante Castellano honestly about her concerns, and make a decision about whether she should get involved with his family. But tonight, all she could think about was Marco's small hand in hers, the way his face had lit up when she described the world for him, the desperate plea he'd made when the lights went out. "Don't leave me alone in the dark." She'd made him a promise, and Sarah Mitchell, whatever her flaws, always kept her promises. Sleep came slowly, troubled by dreams of blind children and dangerous men, and choices that felt impossible. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, the kind of November rain that seeped into your bones and reminded you that winter was coming. Sarah stood outside Boston General, an umbrella in one hand and a package in the other, trying to work up the courage to go inside. She'd barely slept, spending most of the night researching the Castellano family. What she'd found had done nothing to ease her concerns. Dante's father, Angelo Castellano, had died under mysterious circumstances 3 years ago. His mother had passed when he was a teenager. His younger brother had been killed in what was officially ruled a car accident, but what rumors suggested was a targeted hit by a rival family. Dante himself had taken over the family business at 25 and had spent the past decade consolidating power, eliminating rivals, and building an empire that straddled the line between legitimate business and criminal enterprise so carefully that no one could prove which side he truly belonged to. He was dangerous, connected, possibly involved in activities that would make Sarah an accessory if she knew about them and didn't report them. And yet, when she thought about walking away, all she could see was Marco's face, the way his expression had transformed from terror to relief when she'd taken his hand in the dark. "You can do this," Sarah muttered to herself. "Just go up there, talk to him honestly, and if you don't feel safe, you leave. Simple. Except nothing about this." The situation was simple. She was still standing there, paralyzed by indecision, when a sleek black car pulled up to the curb beside her. The back window rolled down, revealing Dante Castellano's sharp features. "Sarah," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you until this afternoon." "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, "and I figured we should have that conversation sooner rather than later." Dante studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Get in. We'll talk on the way up." Sarah hesitated. Getting into a car with a man who might be a mob boss seemed like a spectacularly bad idea, but the rain was picking up, and the parking lot was open and public, and surely he wouldn't do anything to her in broad daylight with witnesses around. She got in the car. The interior smelled of leather, and that same expensive cologne he'd been wearing last night. A driver sat behind the wheel, silent and professional, his eyes never leaving the road ahead. "You researched me," Dante said as soon as the door closed. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Sarah said, deciding honesty was the best policy. "I Googled you last night." "And what did you find?" "Allegations, rumors, suspicions. Nothing proven, but enough to make me nervous about getting involved with your family." Dante nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's smart. You'd be a fool not to be cautious." "So it's true?" Sarah asked. "You're involved in organized crime?" "I run a family business that includes shipping, real estate, and several restaurants," Dante said carefully. "Some people believe we have other interests as well. Some of those people are wrong, some of them aren't." The non-answer was answer enough. Sarah's heart sank. "I can't work for you if you're asking me to be part of something illegal." "I would never ask that of you," Dante said quickly. "Whatever else I may or may not be involved in, Marco is separate from all of it. He's innocent, Sarah. Completely innocent. And what I'm asking you to do, spend time with him, help him adjust to his blindness, give him companionship and support that's legitimate. There's nothing illegal or dangerous about it. Except that being associated with your family could make me a target," Sarah pointed out. Dante's jaw tightened. "Which is why I would provide security for you. Protection. No one would dare touch you once they knew you were under my protection. That's supposed to make me feel better. That I need protection at all?" "I'm being honest with you," Dante said, his voice hard. "Yes, there are risks to being associated with my family. Yes, there are people who might see you as leverage against me. But I would never let anything happen to you, Sarah. You would be safer with my protection than you've ever been in your life." Sarah wanted to argue, but something stopped her. She thought about her current life, the studio apartment, in a building where 3 break-ins had occurred in the past month. The walk to and from the bus stop after dark following her diner shifts, the constant worry about having enough money to pay rent and still eat. Was that really so much safer than what Dante was offering? "Why me?" she asked. "There must be dozens of qualified caregivers in Boston, people with actual experience working with blind children, people who wouldn't ask difficult questions about your business. Why offer me this job?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost vulnerable. "Because Marco chose you. In that hospital room, when he was terrified and alone, he reached for you, and you stayed. You didn't run, you didn't make excuses, you didn't treat him like he was fragile or damaged. You treated him like he was a person worth knowing." Dante turned to face her fully. "I've hired the best specialists money can buy, occupational therapists, mobility trainers, tutors, and they're all excellent at what they do, but not one of them has been able to reach Marco the way you did in an hour. He trusts you, Sarah, and my son's trust is not easily earned." The raw emotion in Dante's voice made Sarah's throat tight. "I don't want to hurt him," she said quietly. "If I take this job and it doesn't work out, if I have to leave, that would devastate him. He's already been abandoned by his mother. I won't be another person who lets him down." "Then don't let him down," Dante said simply. "Take the job. Give it a real chance. I promise you, Sarah, I will make it worth your while. And if you ever feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you can leave. No questions asked, no hard feelings, with a generous severance package to ensure my silence?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Dante's expression hardened. "I'm not trying to buy your silence. I'm trying to help my son. If you can't see the difference, then maybe I was wrong about you." The accusation stung, probably because it was partially true. Sarah had been so focused on protecting herself, on the risks and dangers, that she'd lost sight of what really mattered, a 7-year-old boy who needed help. "I'm sorry," she said. "That wasn't fair. You've been nothing but honest with me." "Relatively honest," Dante corrected with a slight smile. "There are things about my business I can't tell you, for your safety as much as mine." "I understand." Sarah took a deep breath. "If I do this, and I'm not saying yes yet, but if I do, I need certain things to be clear. First, I won't lie for you or help you hide anything illegal. Second, if I see anything that suggests Marco is in danger because of your business dealings, I'm out immediately. And third, Marco's well-being comes first, always. Not your business, not your reputation, not anything else. Him." Dante's smile widened into something that looked almost like respect. "Agreed. All 3 conditions. Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want double what you initially offered, not triple or quadruple. I don't want to feel like I owe you anything beyond doing my job well." "Done." Dante extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah looked at his hand, strong, elegant, belonging to a man who was probably dangerous and definitely complicated. A man who was offering her more money than she'd ever made. A chance to actually help someone instead of just surviving day to day. And a glimpse into a world she'd never imagined entering. She thought about Marco, waiting upstairs, probably listening for her footsteps in the hallway. She took Dante's hand. "We have an agreement." Marco's face transformed the moment Sarah walked into his hospital room, his head turning toward the sound of her footsteps with unerring accuracy that spoke of how finely attuned his hearing had become. "Sarah! You came back!" His voice was bright with genuine joy, and Sarah felt something in her chest constrict at the pure happiness in his tone. "Of course I came back. I promised, didn't I?" Sarah settled into the chair beside his bed, unwrapping the package she'd brought. "And I brought you that surprise I mentioned." "What is it?" Marco's hands reached out eagerly, and Sarah guided them to the object she'd placed on his bedside table. "It's a model of the solar system," she explained, watching his small fingers explore the textured spheres mounted on metal rods of varying lengths. Each planet is a different size and texture, so you can tell them apart by touch. Mercury is small and smooth. Venus is slightly bigger with tiny ridges. Earth has these little bumps that represent the continents and oceans. Marco's exploration grew more focused, his fingers moving from planet to planet with increasing confidence. "This one is huge," he said, finding Jupiter. "And it has a rough patch here, is that the Great Red Spot?" "Exactly right," Sarah said, delighted by his quick understanding. "And the rings around this one. Saturn," Marco exclaimed. "I read about Saturn in Braille. Well, my tutor read it to me, and I felt the words. The rings are made of ice and rock." "That's right. You're really good at this, Marco." "Marco." From the doorway, Dante watched them with an expression that made Sarah's heart ache. The fierce love there, mixed with something like grief, the knowledge that he couldn't give his son this kind of simple joy, no matter how much money or power he commanded. Their eyes met, and Dante mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Sarah nodded, then turned her attention back to Marco, who was now trying to determine the relative distances between planets by measuring the metal rods with his hands. "Sarah," Marco said after a few minutes of intense concentration. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Are you going to be my friend? Like, a real friend? Not just because Papa is paying you?" The question was so perceptive, so heartbreakingly aware, that Sarah had to swallow hard before answering. "Marco, your dad did offer me a job. He wants me to spend time with you, help you with things, be someone you can talk to. But here's the truth. I would want to be your friend, even if he wasn't paying me. You're smart and funny and brave, and I like spending time with you. The job just means I get to do it more often." Marco's face scrunched up as he processed this. So you're like a friend who's also a job?" "Exactly. Like how a teacher can also be someone you really like, or a coach can also be a friend. The job part just makes it official." "Okay," Marco said, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Then yes, I want you to be my friend job person." Sarah laughed, and even Dante chuckled from the doorway. "Friend job person it is. When can I leave the hospital?" Marco asked, turning his head toward where he knew his father stood. "The doctor said maybe today or tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Dante confirmed, moving into the room. "We're just waiting for final clearance from Dr. Morrison, and then you can come home." "Will Sarah come to our house?" Marco asked, a note of anxiety creeping into his voice. "She won't just visit me here and then disappear, right?" "I'll come to your house," Sarah assured him quickly. "In fact, your dad and I were talking about me spending several hours with you every day. We can explore your house together, and I can describe everything to you. We can work on mobility skills, read books, play games, whatever you want. Can we go outside?" Marco's voice was small, uncertain. "I haven't been outside since the accident, except to come here. But I mean really outside, like to a park or something." Sarah glanced at Dante, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Absolutely, we can go outside. We can go to parks, museums, anywhere you want to go." "Even though I can't see anything?" "Especially because you can't see anything," Sarah said firmly. "Marco, you know what I've learned? People who can see miss about 90% of the world around them, because they rely too much on their eyes. But you notice sounds and smells and textures that most people completely ignore. You experience the world differently, not less. Marco was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. My mom said I'd never be able to do normal things again, that I'd always need someone to take care of me. The casual cruelty of that statement, delivered to a child who just lost his sight, made Sarah's blood boil, but she kept her voice calm and gentle. Your mom was wrong, Marco. You'll be able to do almost everything other kids do. Some things might take more practice or require adaptations, but you are absolutely capable of living a full, independent life. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Sarah's right, Dante added, his voice thick with emotion. You can do anything, Piccolo. Anything you set your mind to. Marco's smile was tremulous but genuine. Will you teach me? How to do things without seeing. That's exactly what I'm here for, Sarah said. But I'm not going to do everything for you. I'm going to teach you how to do it yourself, because you're going to be independent and strong and capable. Deal? Deal, Marco agreed, holding out his hand. Sarah shook it solemnly, and Dante's expression softened even further as he watched them. A nurse entered to administer Marco's medication, and Dante gestured for Sarah to follow him into the hallway. Once outside, he led her to a small consultation room, empty except for a table and a few chairs. You're good with him, Dante said once the door closed behind them. Better than I imagined. He's easy to be good with. He's a remarkable kid. He is, Dante agreed, despite everything he's been through. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something before handing it to Sarah. This is the contract my lawyer drew up. Standard employment agreement, non-disclosure clause, salary and benefits outlined on page 3. Read it carefully before you sign. Sarah took the phone, her eyes widening as she scanned the document. The salary was more than double what she'd asked for, easily 4 times what she made at the hospital and diner combined. Health insurance, dental, vision, a monthly stipend for expenses, 2 weeks paid vacation. This is too much, she said, looking up at Dante. No, he corrected. It's exactly what you're worth. What you're doing for Marco, giving him hope, confidence, a sense of normalcy that's priceless. This is just money. Just money, Sarah repeated with a disbelieving laugh. This amount of money would change my entire life. Then, let it. Dante's gaze was intense. Sign the contract, Sarah. Give notice at the hospital and the diner. Start fresh with Marco tomorrow when he comes home. Give both of you a real chance at this. Sarah's finger hovered over the signature line on the phone screen. This was it, the moment of decision. Once she signed, she would be officially entangled with the Castellano family, with all the complications and potential dangers that entailed. But she would also be helping a child who desperately needed her. She would be doing meaningful work for the first time in years. She would be financially stable, able to pay her bills without constantly juggling which ones to skip each month. She signed. Dante's smile was immediate and genuine. Thank you. You won't regret this. I hope not, Sarah said, handing back his phone. When do you want me to start? Tomorrow. I'll have a car pick you up at 9 a.m. We live in Beacon Hill. The townhouse is large, but it's been completely modified for Marco's needs. Braille labels, tactile markers, all furniture corners padded. We have an occupational therapist who comes 3 times a week, and a mobility trainer twice a week. You'll coordinate with them. And what about security? Sarah asked, remembering their earlier conversation. You mentioned protection. Dante's expression grew more serious. There will be someone, watching you whenever you're with Marco. Discreet, but present. You won't always see them, but they'll be there. If you go out in public, they'll increase the perimeter. And I'll need your current address. We'll upgrade the security at your apartment building. That's not necessary. It's non-negotiable, Dante interrupted. You work for me now, Sarah. That makes you part of my household, and I protect what's mine. There was that phrase again, what's mine. The possessiveness in it should have bothered Sarah more than it did. But somehow, coming from Dante, it felt less like ownership and more like a promise. Fine, Sarah agreed, but I'm giving 2 weeks' notice at the hospital. I'm not leaving them in the lurch. Fair enough. What about the diner? I'll talk to Maggie tonight. She'll understand. Dante nodded. There's one more thing. Marco's birthday is in 2 weeks. I'm planning a small party, just family and a few of his therapists. I'd like you to be there." "Of course," Sarah said without hesitation. "What does he want for his birthday?" Dante's expression grew complicated. He wants his mother to come back. Failing that, he wants a friend. So I suppose he's already getting his second wish. The rawness in Dante's voice, the glimpse of the pain he carried for his son, made Sarah want to reach out and comfort him. But she held back, uncertain of the boundaries in their new professional relationship. "I should get back to Marco," she said instead. "I promised to tell him about the aquarium exhibits I saw last year." "Of course." Dante opened the door for her. "Sarah, I meant what I said earlier. You're doing something for my son that no amount of money could buy. I'm in your debt." "You're not in my debt," Sarah corrected. "You're paying me very well to do a job I'm genuinely excited about. That makes us even." But as she walked back to Marco's room, she couldn't shake the feeling that Dante Castellano saw their arrangement as something more than a simple employment contract. And the truly unsettling part was that, despite everything she knew about his dangerous reputation, she was starting to see it that way too. The next 24 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah gave notice at the hospital. Her supervisor was disappointed but understanding. Maggie at the diner was less understanding, though she softened when Sarah explained about Marco and promised to stop by for coffee whenever she could. "Just be careful," Maggie warned, her weathered face creased with concern. "I know the Castellano name, honey. Everyone in Boston does. They're not people you want to get tangled up with." "I'm just helping a blind child," Sarah protested. "There's nothing tangled about it." Maggie's look suggested she believed otherwise, but she let it drop, pulling Sarah into a fierce hug before sending her on her way. That evening, Sarah packed what few belongings she had into 2 suitcases. The contract had included an immediate signing bonus deposited into her account within hours that was more than she made in 3 months. She'd paid her overdue rent, cleared her maxed-out credit card, and still had enough left over to make her want to cry with relief. She was staring at her bank balance on her phone, still not quite believing the number, when a knock sounded at her door. Through the peephole, she saw a man in a dark suit, his build suggesting muscles that knew how to do damage. "Miss Mitchell," he said when she cracked the door open. "My name is Victor. Mr. Castellano sent me to install some security upgrades. At 9 p.m.? Victor's expression didn't change. "Mr. Castellano doesn't wait when it comes to protecting people under his care. May I come in?" Sarah stepped aside, and Victor entered with 2 other men carrying cases of equipment. For the next hour, they installed a new lock on her door, heavy duty, with a deadbolt that looked like it could withstand a battering ram. They added a security camera outside her door, connected to an app on her phone. They replaced her flimsy window locks with ones that would actually keep someone out. "Mr. Castellano also wanted you to have this," Victor said when they'd finished, handing her a sleek phone much newer and more expensive than her current one. "It has a direct line to his security team. Any problems, any concerns, you press this red button and someone will be here in under 3 minutes." Sarah stared at the phone. "Is this really necessary?" "Mr. Castellano thinks so. And in my experience, when he thinks something is necessary, he's usually right." Victor's expression softened slightly. "He cares about his son, Miss Mitchell, a lot. And anyone who helps Marco matters to him. That's not a bad thing." After they left, Sarah sat on her mattress. She really needed to get a proper bed frame and processed what had just happened. In less than 24 hours, her life had completely transformed. New job, financial stability, upgraded security, and tomorrow she would start a role that actually meant something beyond just surviving. She thought about calling her sister in California, sharing the good news. But Amy would have questions about the job, about the Castellanos, about whether Sarah had lost her mind, and Sarah didn't have the energy for that conversation tonight. Instead, she set her alarm for 6 a.m., giving herself plenty of time to prepare for her first official day as Marco's companion, and fell into the deepest, most peaceful sleep she'd had in months. The car that arrived at 9 a.m. was even more impressive than the one from yesterday. A sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, and a driver who introduced himself simply as James. The interior was all leather and wood paneling, with bottled water and fresh flowers in a small vase mounted to the center console. "Mr. Castellano wanted you to be comfortable," James explained as they pulled into traffic. The drive to Beacon Hill takes about 20 minutes, depending on traffic. Sarah spent the drive looking out the window, watching Boston transform from her working-class neighborhood to increasingly upscale areas until they finally reached Beacon Hill, where historic brownstones and brick townhouses lined tree-shaded streets that spoke of old money and established power. The Castellano residence was a 4-story townhouse that somehow managed to be both elegant and imposing. Black shutters contrasted with red brick, and an ornate iron fence surrounded a small but immaculately maintained front garden. The door was painted a glossy black, with a brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. James opened Sarah's door, and she stepped out onto the sidewalk, just as the front door opened. A woman in her 60s emerged, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, kind eyes in a weathered face, an apron tied around her waist. "You must be Sarah," the woman said with a warm smile and a trace of an Italian accent. "I'm Sophia. I've been with the Castellano family since Dante was a boy. Come in, come in. Marco has been watching for you since 7 this morning." Sarah followed Sophia inside, and her breath caught. The entryway was stunning marble floors, a sweeping staircase with an ornate wrought iron railing, a crystal chandelier that caught the morning light and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the walls. But what caught Sarah's attention most was the modifications clearly made for Marco. Thick, textured tape marked the edges of each step on the staircase. Braille labels were affixed to every door. The furniture was arranged in clear pathways, and all the corners were padded with soft foam. Dante spared no expense making the house safe for Marco, Sophia explained, following Sarah's gaze. "Every room has been modified. It's quite something. It's incredible," Sarah said honestly. "Sarah." Marco's voice came from somewhere above them, followed by the sound of small footsteps descending the stairs with surprising confidence. He moved carefully but without fear, one hand trailing along the railing, the other holding something small and metallic. "I'm here," Sarah called back, watching as Marco navigated the last few steps and turned unerringly in her direction. "You came." Marco threw his arms around her waist, nearly knocking her over with the enthusiasm of his hug. "I thought maybe you wouldn't. I thought maybe you'd change your mind." Sarah knelt down to his level. "Marco, I promised you I'd come, didn't I? And I always keep my promises." "Always? Always. Always." Marco's smile was brilliant. "Want to see my room? Want me to show you my room? Papa says I should stop saying see because it's confusing, but I don't know what else to call it." "See is fine," Sarah assured him. "Words can mean different things. When you say you want to show me your room, I know exactly what you mean. Language is flexible." "That's what I said," Marco declared triumphantly, "but Papa worries about saying the wrong thing." From the top of the stairs, Dante's voice carried down, "Your Papa is learning piccolo. Give me time." Sarah looked up to find Dante descending the stairs with the same fluid grace she'd noticed before. Today he wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and Sarah caught the scent of his cologne as he reached the bottom of the stairs. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming." "Good morning. Thank you for the car, that was very kind. James will be your regular driver whenever you need transportation. He knows the city well and has clearance to take Marco anywhere you want to go." Marco tugged on Sarah's hand. "Come on. I want to show you my room before my tutor gets here. Lead the way," Sarah said, allowing Marco to guide her toward the stairs. What followed was a tour that revealed just how thoroughly Dante had prepared his home for his blind son. Marco's bedroom was a child's dream. A large space with a comfortable bed, shelves of audiobooks and braille books, a desk with a braille typewriter, and an entire corner dedicated to tactile learning materials. Everything was organized with meticulous precision, allowing Marco to find what he needed without assistance. "This is where I keep my space stuff," Marco explained, showing Sarah a collection of textured models, planets, rockets, satellites. "And this is my braille books. I'm learning to read really fast. My tutor says I'm gifted." "I bet you are," Sarah said, examining the careful organization. "Marco, who helps you keep everything in order. It's very neat." "I do it myself," Marco said with clear pride. "Papa taught me that if I always put things back in the same place, I'll always know where they are." He says blind people have to be more organized than seeing people because we can't just scan a room with our eyes. That's very true. And you're doing an excellent job. They spent the next hour exploring the house, the library with its Braille catalog, the kitchen where Marco proudly demonstrated how he could make himself a snack using tactile markers on the cabinets, the garden where Sophia had planted herbs, specifically chosen for their strong scents, so Marco could identify them by smell. Throughout it all, Dante remained present but not intrusive, watching from doorways or following a few steps behind. Sarah could feel his eyes on her constantly, assessing, evaluating, making sure she was the right choice for his son. When Marco's tutor arrived, a cheerful woman named Patricia, who specialized in teaching blind children, Dante gestured for Sarah to follow him to his study. The room was masculine and elegant, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive desk that looked like it had been in the family for generations. But what drew Sarah's attention was the wall of photographs, dozens of them, chronicling Marco's life from infancy to the present. The most recent photos showed a smiling boy with bright, engaged eyes. The ones after were fewer, showing a child who'd turned inward, his expression guarded even as his father held him close. That's who he used to be, Dante said quietly, following her gaze. Before the accident. What happened? Sarah asked. If you don't mind me asking. Dante was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs with an expression of such profound grief that Sarah almost told him he didn't have to answer. But then he spoke, his voice low and controlled. We were driving home from his school. Marco was in the back seat, telling me about his day. A truck ran a red light and hit us on the passenger side right where Marco was, sitting. Dante's hands clenched into fists. The impact sent glass into his face. Shards penetrated both eyes. The surgeons tried everything, but the damage was too severe. He's been completely blind ever since. I'm so sorry, Sarah said, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. The worst part is that he remembers sight. He knows what he's missing. He has memories of colors and faces and sunsets, but he'll never see them again. Dante turned away from the photographs. His mother couldn't handle it. She looked at him and saw everything that was lost, everything that would never be the same, so she left. Told me she couldn't stay married to someone whose child reminded her of tragedy every time she looked at him. The casual cruelty of it took Sarah's breath away. That's monstrous. That's Victoria, Dante said with bitter humor. She was never particularly maternal, but I thought she at least loved Marco. I was wrong. Does she visit? Have any contact with him? She sends birthday cards. Impersonal ones with generic messages. Marco keeps them in a drawer in his room, even though someone has to read them to him. Dante's voice hardened. She made her choice. She has no place in our lives anymore. Sarah wanted to ask more questions about the marriage, about how Dante had handled single parenthood while running what appeared to be a vast business empire, about whether Victoria's departure had been entirely voluntary, or if Dante had encouraged it. But something in his expression warned her that they'd reached the limit of what he was willing to share. Marco is adjusting well, Sarah observed instead, returning to safer ground. His mobility in the house is impressive for someone who's been blind less than a year. He works hard, Dante said, pride evident in his voice. Harder than any child should have to. But he's determined to be independent, to prove that he can do things on his own. That's a good quality. We'll build on that. Sarah. Dante moved closer, his presence commanding in the intimate space of his study. I need you to understand something. Marco is everything to me. Literally everything. My businesses, my money, my reputation, none of it matters compared to his well-being. If you can help him, truly help him adjust to his new reality and find happiness again, there is nothing I wouldn't do for you. Nothing. The intensity in his gaze made Sarah's heart race. I'll do my best. I promise. I believe you. Dante reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture that was far too intimate for employer and employee. You have no idea what it means to me that someone like you is willing to help my son. Someone like me? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone genuine. Someone who sees Marco as a child first and a disability second. Someone who isn't intimidated by my reputation or my resources, his thumb traced along her jawline. Someone beautiful and kind and exactly what both of us need. Sarah knew she should step back, re-establish professional boundaries, remind both of them that this was a job, not a relationship. But something held her in place, the warmth of his hand, the vulnerability in his eyes, the overwhelming sense that she'd stumbled into something far more significant than a simple employment arrangement. "Dante," she began, not even sure what she wanted to say. The moment shattered as Sophia's voice called from the hallway. "Mr. Castellano, you have a call. They say it's urgent." Dante's expression shifted immediately, the vulnerability disappearing behind a mask of cold control. "I'll be right there." He turned back to Sarah, his hand dropping away. "I'm sorry. Business. Make yourself at home. Sophia will show you where everything is." He was gone before Sarah could respond, leaving her alone in his study with her heart still racing and her mind swirling with questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. The rest of the day passed in a comfortable rhythm. Marco's tutor left at noon, and Sarah spent the afternoon with him, working on basic mobility skills in the garden. She taught him how to use cardinal directions to orient himself, how to use auditory cues to locate objects, how to trust his other senses to compensate for his lack of sight. "You're really good at this," Marco said as they practiced walking from the garden door to the fountain in the center of the yard. "Better than my mobility trainer. He makes me feel stupid when I mess up." "Then your mobility trainer needs to learn some patience," Sarah said firmly. "Marco, you're learning an entirely new way to navigate the world. That's not easy. Mistakes are part of learning. They don't make you stupid, they make you human." "Sarah?" Marco's voice was small. "Do you think I'll ever be normal again?" Sarah knelt beside him, taking both his hands in hers. "Marco, listen to me very carefully. You are normal. Blindness doesn't make you abnormal or less than anyone else. It just means you experience the world differently. Some of the most accomplished people in history were blind musicians, writers, athletes, scientists. Your blindness doesn't define you. Your character, your intelligence, your kindness, those are what define you." "But I can't see," Marco said, his voice breaking. "I can't see my dad's face anymore. I can't see colors or stars or anything. Everything is just dark all the time." Tears slipped down his cheeks, and Sarah pulled him into a hug, letting him cry against her shoulder. This was the grief he'd been holding back, the loss he'd been too brave to fully acknowledge. "I know," she murmured, stroking his hair. "I know it's not fair, and I know it hurts. And I'm not going to tell you it doesn't matter or that you'll get over it, because that would be a lie. What happened to you is terrible and unfair, and you have every right to be sad about it." "Everyone keeps saying I'm so brave," Marco sobbed. "But I don't feel brave. I feel scared all the time. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared, remember? It means being scared and doing things anyway. And Marco, you are the bravest person I know. Every day you wake up and face a world that's harder for you than it is for most people, and you keep trying. That's real courage." They stayed like that for several minutes, Marco crying out months of held-back grief, while Sarah held him and let him feel what he needed to feel. Eventually, his sobs quieted to sniffles, and he pulled back, wiping at his face. "I got your shirt all wet," he said, sounding embarrassed. "Shirt's dry. You needed to let that out, and I'm glad you felt safe enough to do it with me." "Sarah?" Marco's hand found hers. "Will you always tell me the truth? Even when it's sad?" "Always," Sarah promised. "I won't sugarcoat things or pretend that being blind isn't hard sometimes. But I'll also always remind you of how capable and strong you are." "Okay." Marco squeezed her hand. "Can we go inside now? I'm tired." They made their way back to the house, Marco navigating the garden path with increasing confidence. Inside, they found Sophia preparing lunch pasta with a sauce that made Sarah's mouth water just from the smell. "There you are," Sophia said warmly. "Marco, why don't you show Sarah how you can set the table?" Marco brightened at the challenge, moving through the kitchen with practiced ease. He retrieved plates from a low cabinet, all of them positioned within his reach, and carried them carefully to the dining room. Sarah watched in amazement as he set 3 places with minimal assistance, using tactile markers to ensure proper spacing. "Sophia taught me," Marco explained proudly. "She says every person should know how to do things for themselves, even if they have help available." "Sophia is very wise," Sarah agreed. They were just sitting down to eat when Dante appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. He looked at Sarah, and something in his eyes made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "I need to speak with you," he said quietly. "After lunch. It's important." Marco's face fell. Papa, is something wrong? Dante's expression softened immediately as he looked at his son. Nothing for you to worry about, Piccolo. Just some business matters I need to discuss with Sarah. Now, tell me about your morning. What did you and Sarah do? As Marco launched into an enthusiastic account of their garden practice, Sarah tried to ignore the sense of foreboding that had settled in her chest. Whatever Dante needed to discuss, whatever had put that grim expression on his face, she had a feeling it was going to complicate her already complicated situation even further. And she was right. After lunch, Dante led Sarah back to his study, closing the door with a soft click that somehow sounded ominous in the quiet house. He moved to his desk, but didn't sit, instead standing with his back to her, staring out the window at the garden where she and Marco had spent their morning. There's been a development, he said finally, his voice controlled but tight. One that affects you directly. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of development? Dante turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression that she hadn't seen before: fear. Not for himself, but for someone else. For her, she realized with a jolt. Do you know who the Morettis are? He asked. Sarah shook her head. Should I? They're a family that operates in the same circles as mine. We've had a complicated relationship for years. Mostly we stay out of each other's way, maintain a careful peace, but recently, that peace has become strained. What does this have to do with me? Dante pulled out his phone, tapping the screen a few times before turning it toward her. On the display was a photograph clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens showing Sarah and Marco in the garden that morning. Her hand was in his, their heads close together as she explained something to him. This photo was delivered to one of my businesses an hour ago, Dante said, his voice cold with barely controlled fury. Along with a message. They know about you. They know you're important to Marco, and they're suggesting that they could use that knowledge to their advantage. Sarah's hands started to shake. They're threatening me? Because I work for you? Not threatening. Not yet. This is a warning shot. A way of saying they're watching. They know my vulnerabilities, and they're willing to exploit them if necessary. Dante set the phone down, his jaw clenched. I'm sorry, Sarah. I knew there were risks, but I didn't expect them to move this quickly. You've only been here one day. So what does this mean? Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Do I need to quit? Leave? No. The word was sharp, absolute. You leaving is exactly what they want. It would show weakness, vulnerability. It would tell them that threatening people close to me is an effective strategy. Dante moved closer, his expression intense. But we do need to increase your protection significantly. Starting immediately. What kind of protection are we talking about? Full security detail whenever you're outside this house. Upgraded security at your apartment, actually. I'd prefer if you moved into the guest house on my property. It's separate from the main house, but within our secured perimeter. Sarah's mind reeled. You want me to move in here? Into the guest house, yes. It's fully furnished, completely private. You'd have your own space, but you'd be protected. Dante's voice softened. Sarah, I need you to understand how serious this is. The Morettis don't make empty gestures. If they've identified you as important to me, they'll continue to monitor you, looking for opportunities to leverage that connection. This is insane, Sarah said, moving to one of the leather chairs and sinking into it. I'm just a nurse who's helping your son. Why would anyone care? Because in my world, anyone who matters to me becomes a potential target. It's the price of the life I live. Dante crouched in front of her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. I will not let anything happen to you. I have resources, people, ways of ensuring your safety, but I need you to trust me and follow the security protocols we put in place. Sarah thought about her tiny studio apartment, the neighborhood where she'd never felt entirely safe, even before mobsters were apparently watching her. Then she thought about Marco, who would be devastated if she left, who had finally started to open up and trust someone. If I do this, if I move into your guest house and accept this protection, what happens when my job with Marco is done? What happens when he doesn't need me anymore? Then you leave with a generous severance and security measures in place to ensure you remain safe, Dante said. But Sarah, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Marco needs you. And he paused, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. I'm beginning to think I might need you too. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to examine. This was her employer, a man who operated in a dangerous world, someone she'd known for less than 48 hours. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw genuine concern, genuine fear for her safety, and something else, something that looked disturbingly like the beginning of real attachment. "Okay," Sarah heard herself say. "I'll move into the guest house. But Dante, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this situation escalates, if being associated with your family puts me in real danger, you'll let me go. No arguments. No trying to convince me to stay. You'll make sure I'm safe and let me leave. Deal?" Dante was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the idea of letting her walk away. Finally, he nodded. "Deal. Though I'll do everything in my power to make sure it never comes to that." The next 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal despite the underlying tension. Sarah spent her days with Marco, watching him flourish under her attention. They explored the city with security following at a discreet distance, museums where Marco could touch exhibits, parks where he learned to navigate using sound, even a recording studio where he experimented with audio mixing. The guest house became Sarah's sanctuary, nicer than anywhere she'd ever lived. And through it all, Dante was present but careful, maintaining professional boundaries while his eyes told a different story every time they landed on her. Marco's progress was remarkable. He laughed more, asked for help less, and started talking about the future with genuine hope. The scared child from the hospital had transformed into a confident boy who was learning to thrive despite his blindness. But the threat from the Morettis remained, a dark cloud on the horizon. Twice more, photographs had been delivered, reminders that they were being watched, that the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. Marco's 8th birthday arrived on a crisp Saturday in early December. The small party Dante had planned filled the house with warmth. Sophia's amazing cooking, decorations Marco could appreciate through touch, a cake shaped like Jupiter with edible moons. "Make a wish, Piccolo," Dante said as they gathered around the cake, 8 candles flickering. Marco reached out, his fingers finding the heat of the candles. "I already got my wish," he said, his face turning toward where Sarah stood. "I wished for a friend, and Sarah came. So this year, I'm wishing for something else." "What's that?" Sarah asked. Marco's smile was mischievous. "I'm wishing that Sarah stays forever and becomes part of our family for real." The room went silent. Sarah felt everyone's eyes on her, but none more intensely than Dante's. When she finally looked at him, she saw hope and fear and longing all mixed together in his expression. "That's a big wish," Sarah managed to say. "But I'm not going anywhere anytime soon, Marco. I promise." As the party continued, Sarah found herself watching the Castellano men, Dante's fierce protectiveness, Marco's growing confidence, the love between them that was palpable despite all the challenges they'd faced. And she realized, with a jolt that felt like falling, that Marco wasn't the only one she'd grown attached to. Later, Dante caught her in the garden, the December air cold enough to make her pull her cardigan tighter. He immediately draped his suit jacket over her shoulders. "What Marco said about you staying, about becoming part of the family," Dante began. "He's 8 years old. He doesn't understand the complications." "I do," Dante interrupted. "I understand all the complications. I understand that you work for me, that my world is dangerous, that we've only known each other 2 weeks. I understand that this is probably the worst idea I've ever had." He turned to face her fully, his expression raw. "But I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop wanting you here. Not just for Marco, but for me. Tell me I'm not alone in this." Sarah's heart hammered. She should deny it, maintain boundaries, remind him of all the reasons this was terrible. Instead, she said, "You're not alone." Dante's eyes darkened. "Sarah, but that doesn't mean we should act on it," she continued quickly. "Marco needs stability. He needs me to be his friend and teacher, not his father's girlfriend. And I need to maintain professional distance." "You're right," Dante agreed, though his hands came up to cup her face. "You're absolutely right. This would be complicated and potentially damaging and thoroughly inadvisable." "Exactly," Sarah whispered, leaning into his touch. "So we should definitely not do this," Dante murmured, his face moving closer. "Definitely not," Sarah agreed, her eyes closing. When his lips met hers, it felt inevitable, like something that had been building since that first moment in the hospital. The kiss was gentle at first, exploratory, but quickly deepened as 2 weeks of carefully maintained distance finally shattered. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything. I know. Neither of them noticed the small figure watching from Marco's window, a smile spreading across his face as he saw exactly what he'd wished for. 3 months later, spring had transformed the garden into a riot of color and scent that Marco explored with increasing independence. Sarah stood at the guest house window, watching as father and son worked on a raised bed of herbs, Dante's patient voice guiding Marco's hands. The threat from the Morettis had been resolved not through violence, but through negotiation. Dante had met with Anthony Moretti and brokered a deal that satisfied both families' interests. The photographs had stopped. The tension had eased. Life had settled into something that felt remarkably like normal. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "So you're really staying in Boston? With the mob boss and his kid?" She smiled, typing back. "He's not a mob boss. He's a businessman. And yes, I'm staying." It wasn't entirely true. Dante's world was complicated in ways Sarah was still discovering. But the man she'd come to know over these months was devoted to his son, protective of those he cared about, and surprisingly gentle despite his dangerous reputation. "Sarah," Marco's voice called from the garden, "come see what we planted." "Well, come smell it, it's rosemary." Sarah headed outside, where Marco immediately grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the herb garden. His confidence had grown exponentially. He navigated the garden paths without hesitation, his world expanding daily as his skills improved. "Smell," he instructed, guiding her hand to the fragrant plant. "Papa says rosemary helps with memory, so now whenever I smell it, I'll remember this day." "That's beautiful, Marco," Sarah said, her eyes meeting Dante's over their son's head. Their son, she'd started thinking of Marco that way, though they'd never formalized anything. "Can I go practice piano?" Marco asked. "I want to work on that new song before my lesson tomorrow." "Of course," Dante said. "Just be careful on the stairs." "Papa, I've been going up and down those stairs for months," Marco said with exaggerated patience. "I know every single step." They watched him go, his movements confident as he made his way inside. Once he was gone, Dante moved to Sarah's side, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture that had become natural over the past months. "He's doing so well," Sarah said. "Sometimes I can hardly believe he's graded. The same scared child I met in that hospital room." "That's because of you," Dante said. "You gave him confidence when he'd lost everything else. You showed him that blindness doesn't mean limitation." "We did it together," Sarah corrected. "You, me, Marco himself. It was a team effort." Dante turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Sarah, I need to ask you something." "Okay," she said, suddenly nervous at his tone. "These past 3 months have been the happiest of my life since before Marco's accident. Having you here, watching you with him, seeing how you've become part of our family." He paused, reaching into his pocket. "I know we agreed to keep things professional. I know we said we'd wait until Marco was more stable. But Sarah, I don't want to wait anymore." He pulled out a small velvet box, and Sarah's breath caught. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Dante clarified quickly, seeing her expression. "Not yet, but I'm asking you to officially be part of this family, to stay not just as Marco's companion, but as my partner, as someone building a life with us, not just working for us." He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring, not an engagement ring, but a beautiful band with 3 intertwined diamonds. "One for each of us," Dante explained. "You, me, and Marco. A family." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Dante, before you answer, I need you to know what you'd be agreeing to. My world is complicated. There will always be risks, always be challenges. People will judge our relationship, question your motives. And yes, there may be times when my business creates situations that are difficult or dangerous." "I know all that," Sarah said softly. "I've known it for months, and I'm still here." "Then say yes," Dante urged. "Say you'll stay. Say you'll build this life with us." Sarah looked toward the house, where she could hear the faint sound of Marco's piano practice drifting through the open windows. She thought about the past, 3 months, the challenges and the joy, the fear and the love, the way she'd found a family in the most unexpected place. "Yes," she said. "I'll stay. I'll build this life with you." Dante's smile was brilliant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, deep and sweet and full of promise. "Papa, Sarah," Marco's voice called from the doorway. "Are you kissing again? Because I can hear you, and it's kind of gross, but also kind of nice." They broke apart, laughing. "Come here, Piccolo," Dante called. Marco made his way to them, and Dante guided the boy's hand to where Sarah's ring finger now bore her new ring. "What do you think?" Dante asked. "Sarah's officially part of our family now." Marco's fingers explored the ring, his smile growing wider. "Really? Forever?" "Forever," Sarah confirmed, pulling him into a hug. "Best birthday wish ever," Marco declared, throwing his arms around both of them. As Sarah stood there in the garden, surrounded by her family, this complicated, unconventional, perfectly imperfect family, she thought about that night in the hospital, about a small voice in the darkness begging, "Don't leave me alone." She hadn't left him alone. And in staying, in choosing them despite all the complications, she'd found exactly where she belonged. "I love you both," she said, the words feeling inadequate for the depth of what she felt. "We love you too," Dante said, his voice rough with emotion. "Both of us. Always." Marco nodded against her shoulder. "Always," he echoed. And as the afternoon sun warmed the garden and piano music drifted from the house, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that this messy, complicated, beautiful life was everything she'd never known she wanted. The darkness had brought them together, but it was love that would keep them there. 6 months had passed since that spring afternoon in the garden, when Sarah had officially become part of the Castellano family. The guest house had been transformed from temporary housing into a true home. Sarah's belongings mingled with gifts from Dante and Marco, photographs documenting their growing family covering the walls. But tonight was special. Tonight, everything would change again. Sarah stood in front of her bedroom mirror, smoothing down the emerald green dress Dante had bought for the occasion. Her hand unconsciously went to the ring on her finger, the 3 intertwined diamonds that symbolized their unconventional family. In her other hand, she held a small velvet box, its weight both insignificant and monumental. A knock at the door made her jump. "Sarah, are you ready?" Sophia's warm voice called. "Dante is getting impatient, and Marco keeps asking if it's time yet." Sarah smiled, tucking the box into her clutch. "I'm ready." The main house had been transformed for tonight's dinner party. String lights illuminated the garden paths, and the dining room glowed with candlelight. It was supposed to be a small celebration, just family and a few close friends, but Sarah knew Dante had something planned. He'd been secretive all week, disappearing for mysterious meetings and emerging with satisfied smiles he wouldn't explain. When Sarah entered the living room, her breath caught. Marco stood by the piano in a suit that made him look impossibly grown up, his fingers trailing over the keys in a nervous gesture. And beside him stood Dante, devastatingly handsome in a dark suit, his eyes locked on her the moment she appeared. "You look beautiful," Dante said, crossing to her and taking her hand. His thumb brushed over her ring, a gesture that had become habit, as if he needed the constant reminder that she was real, that she'd chosen to stay. "So do you," Sarah replied, then turned to Marco. "And you look very handsome, young man." Marco's smile was bright with barely contained excitement. "Sarah, can I tell her? Papa said I had to wait, but can I tell her now?" "Tell me what?" Sarah asked, looking between father and son with suspicion. Dante chuckled. "Patience, Piccolo. We'll tell her soon enough." The doorbell rang, and within minutes, the house filled with familiar faces. Victor and his wife, Patricia, the tutor with her husband, Sophia's daughter and grandchildren. Even Sarah's sister Amy had flown in from California, though Sarah had no idea how Dante had arranged that. "Amy!" Sarah embraced her sister, tears already threatening. "What are you doing here?" "Someone very persistent called me," Amy said, shooting Dante an amused look. "Said it was important I be here tonight. Something about family." As they moved to the dining room, Sarah noticed Marco practically vibrating with excitement beside his father. Whatever surprise Dante had planned, Marco was clearly in on it. Dinner was Sophia's masterpiece, course after course of Italian perfection, accompanied by wine that probably cost more than Sarah's old monthly rent. The conversation flowed easily, laughter, punctuating stories and memories. Marco had moved to sit beside Sarah, his hand finding hers under the table at one point. "Sarah?" he whispered while the others were engaged in conversation. "I just want you to know, whatever Papa asks you tonight, I really hope you say yes, because you're the best thing that ever happened to us." Sarah's throat tightened. "Marco." "It's time," Dante announced, standing and gently tapping his wine glass with a fork. The room quieted, all eyes turning to him. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This past year has been transformative for my family, and I wanted to celebrate that with the people who matter most." He moved to stand behind Marco's chair, his hands resting on his son's shoulders. 9 months ago, my son was terrified and alone in a hospital when the lights went out. A kind nurse stopped to help him, even though he wasn't her patient, even though she had no obligation to stay. That moment of compassion changed everything. Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks as everyone looked at her. "Sarah didn't just help Marco adjust to his blindness," Dante continued, his voice thick with emotion. "She gave him back his confidence, his joy, his belief that he could do anything. She became the friend he'd wished for, and so much more." Marco stood, turning to face the room with practiced confidence. "Sarah taught me that being blind doesn't mean being limited. She taught me to trust myself and to be brave even when I'm scared. And she did something else, something even more important. She made my papa smile again," Marco said, his voice clear and strong. "She made our house feel like a home. She made us feel like a real family." Dante moved around Marco's chair to stand beside Sarah. He took both her hands in his, and Sarah saw they were trembling slightly. This powerful, controlled man was actually nervous. "Sarah Mitchell," Dante began, and Sarah's heart started hammering as he lowered himself to one knee. Around the room, she heard gasps and murmurs, but her entire world had narrowed to the man kneeling before her. 9 months ago, you walked into our lives and everything changed. You've given my son confidence and joy. You've given me hope and love and a future I never dared to imagine. You've taken a broken family and made us whole." He pulled a ring from his pocket, not the simple band she already wore, but a stunning diamond that caught the candlelight in brilliant fractals. "I'm asking you to make this official, not as Marco's companion, not as my partner, but as my wife, as Marco's mother in every way that matters, as the foundation of the family we're building together." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as Dante continued. "I know my world is complicated. I know there will always be challenges. But I promise you this, I will spend every day of my life making sure you never regret choosing us. I will protect you, cherish you, and love you until my last breath." Marco moved to stand beside his father, his hand finding Dante's shoulder. "Please say yes, Sarah. Please be my mom for real." Sarah looked at them, this beautiful, broken, healing family that had become hers. She thought about that night in the hospital, about the terrified voice in the darkness that had called to something deep in her soul. She thought about the risks she'd taken, the fears she'd overcome, the life she'd built with them despite every logical reason to walk away. And she thought about the small velvet box in her clutch, the surprise she'd been planning to share tonight. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with joy. "Yes, I'll marry you. Both of you." The room erupted in applause and cheers as Dante slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her deeply. Marco threw his arms around both of them, and for a moment, the three of them stood in a tight embrace while their chosen family celebrated around them. "I have something to tell you too," Sarah said when they finally separated, her hands shaking as she retrieved the velvet box from her clutch. "I was going to wait until after dinner, but this seems like the right moment." She opened the box to reveal a tiny white onesie, impossibly small, with "Coming Soon, Baby Castellano" embroidered across the front. Dante's eyes widened, his gaze snapping from the onesie to Sarah's face. "You're pregnant," Sarah confirmed, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "About 10 weeks. I found out last week, but I wanted to wait for tonight to tell you. I'm going to be a big brother?" Marco's voice was awed, his hands reaching out to touch the tiny clothing. "Really? Really?" Sarah said, guiding his fingers over the embroidery. "In about 7 months, you'll have a little brother or sister." Dante pulled her close, his face buried in her hair, and Sarah felt his shoulders shaking. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. "You've given me everything," he said, his voice rough. "Everything I never dared to hope for. A partner, a growing family, a future full of light instead of shadows." "We gave it to each other," Sarah corrected, her hand finding Marco's. "All 3 of us soon to be 4. As the celebration continued around them, as Sophia brought out champagne and sparkling cider, as Amy hugged her sister and whispered how proud she was, Sarah felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This was her family. Complicated, unconventional, born from darkness and fear but sustained by love and courage and choosing each other every single day. Marco tugged on her hand. Mom, can I feel your belly? Is the baby in there now? Yes, sweetheart. The baby's in there now, growing bigger every day. Marco carefully placed his hand on her still flat stomach, his expression one of wonder. Hi, baby, he whispered. I'm your big brother, Marco. I can't wait to meet you. I'm going to teach you so many things like how to navigate by sound, and how to play piano, and how to make Papa laugh. And I'm going to tell you the story of how our family came together, about the nurse who wasn't scared of the dark, and the wish that came true. Dante's arm wrapped around Sarah's waist, pulling her close while his other hand rested on Marco's shoulder. Their family built from broken pieces, strengthened by love, and now growing in ways none of them had imagined. I love you, Sarah said, the words encompassing both of them, and the tiny life growing inside her. My family. My heart. My home. Always, Dante promised, pressing a kiss to her temple. Forever, Marco added, his hand still resting protectively over his future sibling. And as candlelight flickered across their faces and joy filled every corner of the house that had once seemed too empty, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that every risk had been worth it. Every fear overcome, every boundary crossed, every moment of doubt conquered by love. They had found each other in the darkness, but together, they had created a light that would guide them through anything life brought their way. A family forged not by blood or circumstance, but by choice, by courage, by love. And that made it the strongest family of all. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.